Hey everybody, it's Michael from Steelyard here with Marsha McDonald for the next part of our summer series, continuing on from High Point at Home, still in the Airstream. Marsha McDonald is an architectural designer and educator whom I met in January. So thrilled to have you, Marsha.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
So there's a lot there, architectural designer, educator. We're going to get into all of that, but I love to tell our audience first how I meet people. And frankly, this was at Las Vegas Market in the Steelyard Designers Lounge. You came for one of the events we had, and I'll admit, just because I'm a sucker, I introduced myself to you because of your Jamaican accent. I've got an affinity for Jamaica. I love Jamaica. I heard your accent, and you and I started talking, right?
Yes. Pretty much, and that's how we've begun. Yes.
Yes, and I learned so much about you that day, and we've been in touch for the last couple months about a diversity summit you have coming up. So we want to talk all about that as well. And look, in the context of you and I talking for several months, but the world has changed too. So we'll get to all of that. But first, let me ask this question. Architectural designer and educator, break that down. Tell everybody what you do. What is that? What does that mean?
Wow. So essentially, I'm trained as an architect, which means I have two masters in architecture. One is a professional, and then one is a research-based masters of architectural degree. The designer part, well, while I was going to school, we had to eat. So I got a job working for a general contractor who hired me to design kitchens. So, I started out in the kitchen and bath industry as, remodeling, quickly learned everything, ended up managing the office and the showroom and doing the design work, and moved on to focus solely on kitchens and bath design. So, the whole progress, we did that. I ended up getting into custom cabinetry, and did custom millwork, custom kitchens, custom bath, and eventually owned one of the shops that I worked at, and pretty much said I was going back to school, and went back to school for another degree, and got an opportunity to teach. And so I was a professor.
Okay, the educator piece, got it.
Yes, that's the educator piece. So, got a really great opportunity to not just learn, but, I got some great opportunities. And then they hired me to teach for a year while I was doing the last master's, and also did summer schools, and started working with youth organizations like the Young Arts. And we did, I was a part of the inaugural team for the design arts portion of the Young Arts organization. So that's kind of some of the high points.
That's great. And look, we talk to a lot of designers and a lot of architects, so that piece of who you are is incredibly important for our audience. But I'm fascinated by the educator piece, and it really is the thing that drew me to you in January, beyond your accent, which did it. But that was the piece we started talking about. And you told me about this diversity summit. It's the Diversity in Design, Arts, and Architecture Summit. It's coming up here in a few weeks. So take us through first, before we get into the details of that, where did this concept come from to put on this summit? And again, addressing the new reality of the world of the last 30 days, where diversity has become such a big topic, and rightfully so. How has that impacted what you're trying to do with this summit?
Well, when I moved here, I came from Jamaica, working in an architectural firm, did quite a bit in terms of architecture. And when I moved here, looked at the landscape, so to speak, and sharing with a few people, hey, this is what I want to do. And some people didn't understand what that was. And I said, well, and here's where, the diversity side came in. I said, well, a Black doctor, right? And a Black lawyer, but do you know a Black architect? Mm-hmm. And the answer most times came back with no. And so I started doing my research and started looking at the numbers. What I took for granted in Jamaica, where most of the architects that I knew who were in the industry were Black, or, or mixed, or whatever you want to say it. I came here and I was looking for my, I don't want to say peers or anything, but I was just looking for, just to see, the landscape, so to speak. And I looked at the numbers and I started getting the statistics and recognized that, for someone like myself, who is a Black woman, and also I'm, from the Caribbean, that, my statistics in terms of representation was extremely low. Especially if you're a Black woman, you're like at 2%, and, less than 1%. And if you were a Black male or just a Black architect, you were about the 2 to 3%. And I started then expanding that, looking at those numbers and looking at, well, is it just Blacks? Asians, the numbers were low. The Hispanics, the numbers were low. And I said, well, why the disconnect? And then I started researching and I started talking to people, and I said, well, we need to have a conversation. Just as you and I are having a conversation, to know a little bit more about the landscape. I started having these conversations for career days. So I said, if somebody wants to come and talk about the profession, I did career days, both in elementary up to college programs, and then I said, okay, let's organize a larger event, and got a few people and did a few talks at libraries, and then it started to grow from that point.
I love that you identified the problem, the challenges, and then you said, how can I influence that? How can I go and talk to people about being an architect, being a designer, introducing a concept to them? That's awesome. So from elementary all the way up to college, but now you've got a bigger audience. Now you're putting together this summit, which takes place this year in just a few weeks, June 24th to July 1.
Mm-hmm.
About that, because I've seen the roster, I've seen the schedule, I'm blown away. I want to go through the details of that, but take us through also something you and I talked about the other day. I've got so many questions. The multi-level, multi-tiered approach to diversity that you're taking with this summit. So take us through all of that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that was apparent was, even if all the firms now decided to start hiring more diverse candidates, I'll frame it that way, we still don't have enough people in the funnel. We don't. And so I realized that it needed to be multi-level in the approach, multi-generational in the approach, and multicultural in the approach. And I'm from the Caribbean. And so in the Caribbean, we basically have a diverse mix of people. And I'm certain you can remember that. And I said, okay, let's put together something that touches the design community, the architecture community, talk about tourism, of which is a major part of the Caribbean, talk about the community here and the community in the Caribbean, and then, have a historic talk also. So we have the Designers Day, we have the Architects Day, the Tourism Focus Day, the Community Focus Day. I've partnered with a gentleman who does urban tours in Miami, and he's going to go through, so we're going to bring it home to South Florida. So it's not just the Caribbean, but a lot of us don't, and maybe you do know, if you come to South Florida, there is a high percentage of Caribbean descendants and people who are actually born in the Caribbean. So our numbers are higher than a lot of other places. So so his name is David Brown. He's going to do a tour through Miami, and he's going to show some of the architecture or some of the details that kind of references Caribbean influence. And some of the influence, it's just mind-boggling. The Bahamians helped to build a lot in South Florida. We have Lady Haiti in Miami. Broward County, the mayor is Jamaican. So there's a lot that I wanted to allow for us to kind of touch a lot of different points. And it's, some people might think it's a lot, it's a lot, but you know what? To me, it's like a buffet, which is what the Caribbean is like, So we do have days for the kids, because that's also important, because a lot of children, you want them to be thinking of design and architecture as a career. And that's what happened to me. I didn't decide I was going to be an architect when I was in my 30s or in my 20s. I decided when I was a teenager, you know? So that's a starting point. So I have, I'm in talks with a great guy who's going to talk about how to become licensed and how to get into the career. And, you know, we just have a lot of great information for everyone.
Okay, so the 24th to the 1st is a long time, but folks can
Yes,
kind of jump in and out, right? They can come
yes.
for certain topics and events and maybe come back 2 days later for something else, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to Disney, you don't go on all the rides all at once. Don't.
Right, right. We can dabble here, a little bit here, a little bit
Right.
there. Doing this virtually obviously gives you an added benefit of being able to allow folks to do that. So that's pretty
Yes.
cool. Yes. Okay, so tell me, and again, with your Caribbean history and being Jamaican, you've got a little museum piece going on too. Outside of this summit, you were driven to the history of the Caribbean as you talked
Yeah.
about the summit. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, part of my research, you know, to understand architecture, I wanted to understand my heritage and how that was represented in architecture. And, you know, studied, you know, looked at different archives throughout the world. And also at FIU, which is where I went, they have a digital collection of the Caribbean. And so I started researching and realized that there were so many things that I didn't realize and didn't know. And so I have a girlfriend who she's a TV producer, and she has a show that's also you know, groundbreaking in terms of the Caribbean market. And she's doing these events, and she's a girlfriend of mine, went to high school together. And I said, hey, you know what, this is purely entertainment focused. How about infusing something that is educational and cultural? And so I said, let's categorize the food. And you know, who categorizes food? Well, I do. You should come to
Right.
my house one day, I'll cook for you. You know, and I said, well, let's have a discussion just on the flavors of the food, you know, it being sweet, it being salty, it being spicy, you know, savory, all those wonderful things. And then start talking about how there was an infusion of flavors, and how and that, you know, we have these meals, we call them like a pepper pot, where everything is in there but it all comes out right, you know. And that's part of the whole diversity talk, that everything is in there. And if we all just get it right together, you know, it will just advance everything that we're all doing, because we all love to design.
Absolutely. And I think that's the important thing, Marsha, is your core is about design and architecture and bringing beauty into
Yeah.
spaces, right? And there's so much we can learn from history and other cultures. And I think everybody has an opportunity with this summit to learn
Yes.
something. I mean,
Yes.
I've seen the list, and we're going to post, you know, a link to the sign up page and everything where you can see the schedule. It's remarkable. You've got politicians, you know, talking diversity, right? You've got a mayor, you've got designers that come from places like the Caribbean. You've got other educators. You've got
Yes.
for all populations, designers, manufacturers,
Hmm.
you know, parents that care about
Yeah.
diversity. You're covering a little bit of everything, and that's what's so remarkable about it. So I'm glad. I'm glad we met in January. I'm glad you're doing this, and I'm glad you're doing it right now. Speak to that. What does this become more meaningful in today's environment? I mean, again, it's what you are doing anyway. You care about,
Yeah.
and you're passionate about it. But what does the environment of today, you know, how does that affect things?
You know, there's a lot that could be said, but ultimately diversity speaks to the fact that we all have a place. You know, we all have something to contribute. And when we're allowed to do that, then it becomes much more meaningful, our lives, and enriching. I learn from you, you learn from me. And I think that's what's important now, that we come to that common place, that I learn from you, you learn from me, you know, that we're all in this together. And I think talking about diversity isn't a bad word. It isn't a divisive word, I'm sorry. It's more a word that says, oh, you have a different perspective, I have a different perspective. And, you know, it's more like, today I like red and I like blue and I like, you know, something that is coastal or something that is, you know, so they're different flavors, they're different perspectives that when we all put it together, it really does enhance our lives. I mean, I know my life was enhanced when I met you, and that's what this whole summit is about. You know, learning more, understanding more, and then coming out with a common goal and a common perspective.
I think that's right, Marsha. And I think the word I would use is listening, right? You know, not everybody's got the answers how to solve all the problems in the world, diversity in an industry or in the world or otherwise.
Right.
But if we listen to each other's experiences, you know, then it makes us all more valuable as people, as members of society in this industry. And you and I have talked about this. We both want to lift this industry. We want this industry to be a beacon. We want it to be a model for others. And I think your summit helps us get there. So that's why I'm so glad to talk about it and promote it. So we're gonna make sure people know how to sign up, and we are gonna jump in and out for, you know, from the 24th to the 1st. We're gonna be part of everything. Yes. So thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so excited for not only the summit, but for everything you're doing going forward. So thanks to you for being who you are and caring about this issue.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity and just being able to meet more people and connect with more people so that, yes, we can all learn to listen to each other more.
Absolutely. Good luck with the summit. We'll talk soon.